welcome to another episode of Coffee with Karl and Kofi. Man, I'm excited. I'm excited. We got a pretty interesting book this week, and there's some points in here as we were kind of, talking briefly before we started that's, maybe even a little bit controversial, but I think are really going to shed some light for our
Yeah,
audience, our listeners on just like a new way of thinking about building wealth and building abundance in
mm,
our lives.
it's very important, folks. I have been under the suspicion that the window of wealth creation as relates to America is narrowing. I think things are
Mm-hmm.
getting harder and harder. And as I say that, one of the largest wealth transfers is happening right now from, boomers to millennials, right? That's us. We were just off camera talking about B2B companies, 10,000 baby boomers coming online every single day that built businesses with their hands that have nowhere to really like sell them so that they can retire and exit off into the sunset. So there's an opportunity out there, and I love this book by Two Dub Wallace Waddles. I think he's popularly known as Two Dub in certain communities because there is just such rich information and practicality around how to actually orient your mind to be a person that has capacity to attract, cultivate, and maintain and grow riches. And so, if you're interested in how you can possibly do that, today is the episode for you. We'll probably be able to knock this one out maybe in one or two takes of coffee conversations with Karl and coffee, because as I
Yeah.
have it here in my hand, I mean, it literally is like 100 pages, if that even, and it's like super wide
Yeah.
font and all of that. So just a really, really spectacular read. But let's jump into it, brother. I mean, you kind of hinted at some controversial things. Let's go there, man. I think we've all kind of lost
Mhm.
the skill
Yeah.
around being able to comfortably approach controversial, whatever that means,
Yeah.
conversation. So let's go there, man, and let's have some dialogue for the people.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So, one thing that I also want to say before I dive into this first topic, our first point that I took away from the book is, this book was written in 1910, man. Like, and it's so
Mm,
amazing how like so many of these principles are still relevant today. I just
mm,
found it fascinating how like his message really transcends time and people can truly apply this stuff. So again, guys, like pick up this book. It is absolutely amazing. But so one of the first points for me that I thought was just like very real. And how he put
mhm.
it, he was just like, it is not possible to live a full and complete life unless someone is rich.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. I picked up on that too. The way that I liked it was our desire to become rich is really our obligation to seek a fuller expression of ourselves. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think about the way that I like to live my life. Like I like to love on my family and friends,
Yeah.
heck, even strangers. Like I like to bless people. And me liking to do those things is less to do with me, and it's all to do with what I am investing into those people and how that
Yeah.
investment can be carried forward. And quite frankly, folks, money is an amplifier of
Yeah.
something like that, right?
Absolutely.
Money is a vehicle to access that level of transfer, in this
Mm-hmm.
case of this love
Mm-hmm.
and energy at a higher expression. So the fact that we're not here for that long of a time anyways, for me, really creates this urgency that like, wow, I've got to build riches as quickly as I possibly can so that I can provide more of that value to my family, my friends, my community, and heck, even strangers.
Yeah.
So love
Absolutely.
that. That's how I interpreted it.
Yeah, and one thing I heard very maybe years ago that really kind of like solidified this for me, but I forgot who exactly was speaking, but he said that, he doesn't want to get to the end of his life and feel like there was still gas left in the tank. Like he wants to live his
Hmm.
life so the gas tank is empty by the end, essentially living his life to the fullest, right? And I think that's such like such a noble thing to do, right? It's like imagine
Yep.
you're playing in a sports game, right? Like, how would you feel at the end of that sports game? You feel like, man, I could have like ran a little bit harder. I could have,
Yeah.
blocked a little bit harder. I could have really put a little more grit in. You wouldn't feel like you truly put your all in. And so many people get to the end of their lives and they have that feeling, right? When people say they regret the things that they did not do, not the things they did do. They get to
Mm.
their life, man, like I feel like I did not put my all in. And with getting rich, it really is just like living life to your fullest. You're living life to your fullest capacity. And as we'll continue to dive in here, it's not a selfish thing to do. It's truly a selfless thing to do because when you do that, you're able to give more. You're able to, be a better version of yourself. You're able to, really be a bigger impact in your community. And like that, pursuit doesn't just affect you,
Mm.
every single person around you, right?
I could feel the energy. I'm sending some to you. And I could only, this is why I need to get more, that's why I need to get more rich, because I could send you more if I had more riches.
Exactly.
So we're gonna jump in, folks. So what is the science of getting rich? So I want to break down sort of the formula that Wallace Wattles mentions a couple times in the book. And it's a three-part formula, and I'm just going to read from my notes. So first and foremost, the science of getting rich always begins with thinking stuff, right? And thinking
Mm,
stuff is where all things are made. This is the original state that permeates, penetrates, and fills the inner spaces of the universe,
mm,
right? And we're going to come back and break that down. Number two, thoughts on this substance, the thinking stuff, produce things that are imagined by thought, right? So
mhm,
everything that we interact with, that we place a value on, essentially is once a thought, right? And
mhm.
last but not least, a person can form things in his thoughts, and by impressing his thought upon formless substance, can cause the thing that he thinks about to become created, right? And
Yeah.
again, Kofi, you gave us the context here. This was written in 1910, so I recognize that this is probably not colloquial to today's times in 2023. So let's break that down for the people. Let's take the thinking stuff. How did you interpret that?
Yeah, so I interpreted the thinking stuff, and this was kind of like a very esoteric idea for me, and I see it as like it is almost like the raw materials. It is like the raw materials that is always present on Earth. It's like everything that like I feel like the divine God has created that is always present on our Earth that we have the ability because we were made in his image as creators to form
Mm-hmm.
and to cultivate. Like if you think back to like millions and millions of years ago before there was civilization, before there were cities and all these things, there were all these different like raw materials that like was present, right? We had everything on the earth that was needed in order to create all the stuff we have now. And so that thinking stuff was almost like a formless, like it was all the like raw materials, but it also like the formless energy, and like the the almost raw essence energy that we have to like be able to form using our abilities as
Yes.
humans to create other things in life. So it's almost like, there's this abundance of like materials and like there's nothing that like cannot be created out of this thinking stuff if we have
Yes.
the power of thought.
That's bingo for Kofi, an abundance of raw materials.
Mm-hmm.
That is the key piece right there to focus on, because oftentimes when we think about something we desire, we think that we can't create that thing because our mind is attached to something that we lack to go out and actually create that desire and make it whole or make it form. A good
Right?
example of this way back in the day would have been a chair. Like I'm sitting down in a chair, and this one happens to be like made out of metal, but somewhere that metal just existed as metal,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or somewhere wood just existed as wood, right?
Yeah.
Not very helpful for me in terms of my desire to be able to sit my bottom in a chair. But
Mm-hmm.
someone was like, oh, how do I take this raw metal, or how do I take this raw wood that is in abundance as you go outside and there's just like wood sitting there. And how do I create this thing called a chair that I desire to sit in, right? So like that's definitely a more primitive example, but I think you could look around in today's world and look at it from like a digital perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
You could find that there is a desire to learn something or that people have a desire to learn something. You're going through your feed and you're seeing like comments around people struggling around a desire to, I don't know, learn how to knit. And you could say, oh, wow, well, I've got generations and generations of aunts and grandmothers that were like expert knitters. And this was something that they taught me that I never really thought could be of value or that I never really thought I could put out into the world. And you could take all of that formless information that was passed on to you and create an ebook. And I know it's a really,
Mm-hmm.
really cheesy example, but
Yeah.
literally take all that formless content that your family handed down to you around knitting and organize it into something that has form and then deliver it. Like that is a value exchange that closes that gap. And then the beautiful thing is that if you position it the right way, people would be happy to pay you for that value that you organize. So that's what I'm
Yeah.
understanding Wallace Wattles saying with this first point about the science of becoming rich, where it's thinking stuff that permeates, penetrates, and fills, right? You got to organize it so that it can fill a gap in time and space, right? It
Mm-hmm.
can penetrate the confines of the person that is desiring that information. And if you do that in a very nice and organized manner, they're going to be more than happy to pay you, which is where riches start to come
Absolutely.
from.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, another great way of thinking about this is like, imagine like if you're just like creating a dish, right? And you don't
Mm-hmm.
have a recipe. Like you are utilizing like your that thinking stuff to kind of
Yeah.
pull, different, ideas, maybe like different things you've experienced, different like, tastes you've had to kind of create this like one ultimate dish. And this thing like it hasn't been done before, right? Like you're doing something for the
Right.
first time. And we do this all the time. And I think it's so important for us to remember as humans that we all have this power. We all have this
Yes.
inherent power to like, take raw materials and create something new. Another amazing example is like when music is composed, right? Like
Yeah.
people like, create this like, amazing composition of like all these different sounds. And like, it's just like, it just comes from like their mind and their ability to like take what's out there and then like
Yeah.
utilize that and then create that new song that's just amazing. I think to me it's just so fascinating because when you understand that, when you realize that, you also see that we all have this power to be creators in our own world. We don't have to
Yes.
like run down the hamster wheel like a number in a factory or whatever it is. Like we all have this ability to like really change and take our thoughts and create whatever it is that we truly desire
Yes.
world, which is
Yes.
so
Yes.
empowering. Like,
Yes. Yes. But I find that too often many of us have not exercised what Wallace is saying here, right?
mhm, yeah,
In terms of thinking, it's almost like there is a roadblock to thinking because
mhm,
thinking has become, let's face it, man, thinking is probably some of the most important work any of us will ever do.
yeah,
There's a reason why people like Warren Buffett spend their entire day just reading.
mhm,
I'm re-listening to Ray Dalio's Principles, and he's
mm,
talking about how he would just spend so much time when he wasn't like trading the markets, he would just spend so much time just reading news and
yeah,
thinking. Like thinking has become overrated. And what I learned when I was in Prague for the listeners to give you some context for 3 months, from August to basically October. And I was at this event and these incredible entrepreneurs that had created all this disruptive technology were talking about how they did what they did, how they created their companies from this formless stuff. And one of the gentlemen shared something that's so practical that I want to leave with the audience because I want to keep these conversations here very practical. And he was like, literally every day, and this is something I still do, and I'm obviously paraphrasing, I sit down and I try to write 10 to 20 ideas as quickly as possible.
Hmm.
And I would encourage everybody listening, write 10 to 20 ideas. And honestly, as I took on the challenge, I was struggling. Like I had like maybe three or four things, and then I was like so in my head trying to get to like the 10 to 20. And I looked around and I could see other people having stumbling blocks as well too. But what this does is that if you can stay disciplined enough to continue with this exercise, you start to really build your ability to take these formless things that are ideas and translate them into something that's permeated on the page, which is now an idea that has been recorded. Do that
Mm.
enough times, you might actually find something that can be created to add value to where there can be an exchange for money, riches to
Yeah.
come to you. So I want to leave that with the listeners because I do want to make all of this stuff like
Yeah.
not super fluffy and something that they can, take some action on.
Absolutely, absolutely. And one thing that I would also like to give to our listeners as well too is, create space for yourself. Like, I believe that the world that we live in today keeps our minds so occupied. Like, and
Yeah.
I can definitely, I've been a victim of it. I don't like to use that word, but I've definitely succumbed to it before as well too. Constantly, thinking about the next task that needs to be done for my business, thinking about the next thing that needs to be done with the content I'm creating, thinking about the next workout. And I, have been in spaces where I'm like, man, my mind is like always occupied. That's why, I have a meditation practice. I started, probably a decade ago, but I really got more consistent in the last couple of years. And now I'm like adamant about spending it for me at least, 30 to 40 minutes a day just clearing my mind, like letting my
Mm-hmm.
mind just like clear itself. Because if you're just constantly occupied, you really don't have that ability to actually utilize, that your mind's power or its ability to think of new ideas, to think of, ways to get yourself out of your current situation and maybe experience something different because you're constantly just going to be running like the same script and you have to like
Mm-hmm.
separate yourself from like the day to day every once in a while. And that could either be through for me, it's like I'll do like a 20-minute meditation. And what I try to do is I try to really just like focus on either my breath to clear my mind and just like, just get back to really just a ground level, not just thinking about all the things that are going on. Or another thing as I visualize like a river almost like flowing by, and I may see things in this river, but my practice is I try not to reach or grab or attach myself to these things. I try to just let
Mm-hmm.
it flow by, let it pass, and allow myself to be in this peaceful state. And it's extremely powerful because like I've noticed that it allows me to be at a much better base level and not so reactive in the world. Because when you're constantly reacting to things, like you are always going to be in a state where like it's just going to be difficult to create. Like it's going to be so hard to create. And in order for us to create or truly be like truly produce, we have to be like very present. We can't be thinking about the past or thinking about the future. So what I would encourage our audience to do is make sure that you're separating some time for yourself. Maybe taking a walk and maybe meditating, maybe taking 30 minutes at the end of the day to journal, but allow your mind to just like free itself from the ties that we have in our day to day.
Yeah. Something else, I love that you brought up not operating from a reactive state. Something else that typically puts people in a reactive state that can prevent the flow of ideas that can become very valuable is this competitive mindset, right? And this is
Ooh,
something
yes.
else.
I love
that
this.
Wallace
Yeah,
Waddles talks about in the book. You know, he
yeah,
says you are to do your very best to get rid of thoughts of
hmm,
competition. You know,
yeah,
we are here to create, right?
yes,
We are to place more of an emphasis on creator versus competitor. And going back to my Prague example, when we did that exercise of the 10 to 20 ideas, and then they had people come on stage and share some of their ideas, the thing that I noticed as a recurring theme that prevented people from putting down certain ideas was, well, that already exists. And, you know, why would I want to compete? Or somebody's already doing it. And
hmm,
so my idea has no place
yeah,
in the world. And I think that is a competitor mindset,
absolutely.
right? Because let's face it, by and large, just about everything that was once a problem does have some sort of a solution, but it doesn't mean that the solution that exists in its current form, which is what Wallace talks about, is the ideal solution for everybody out there in the
Hmm,
marketplace.
hmm,
You might have a improved approach. You might have discovered an alternative that could be turned into form and that might have more value or more intended application or a better intended application for a specific somebody out there.
hmm,
So I really want to drive that home because I think that there is a limited belief that comes to mind that sort of caps that creativity because of what already exists as a competitive solution
yeah.
in the market. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm so glad that you brought that up because this is like a huge reason why I actually left the company culture that I was at before because I realized like it was just like this very, very competitive nature, this very competitive environment. And I realized I had to go out on my own because I truly want to be in a creating environment. I want to be in a creator space. And the competition mindset, like not many people may admit this, but what it's truly born from is scarcity. That's the reality. If you're constantly like, if you're in a place where you're like, man, I need to be first, or maybe you see someone, I remember I used to do this when I was younger, like maybe like I was out there dating and stuff like that. And like this really cute girl, maybe I knew in high school, she got married, and I was like, darn, man, oh my gosh, like great one got away or something along those lines. And I was always in this like competitor mindset, feeling like I was always like losing. And I realized that no, there's truly abundance in the world. There's no need. And he actually puts it really greatly in the book. Like if there's an opportunity that comes up that maybe someone takes advantage of, don't feel like you're at loss because there's something down the road that is for you, that's better for you out there. Like there's truly like so much abundance in the world. And when you are in that space of really just creation, like you're not so like I feel like you also can be a better supporter of others as well too. It's really amazing because it really changes your relationships, not just with yourself, but also with other people. Like you're able to actually cheer people on. You're able to actually come from a good place and you're able to, lift people up when they create something because you're like, hey, like when someone starts a business or when someone does something great, like they're just adding more and more value. They're just taking again this thought form and creating,
Yeah,
and that's in no way taking away from you. That's in no way taking
yeah,
away from that you have. That's really just like, again, they're just taking more of this abundant material and creating stuff. And I think a lot of people, may do this. Sometimes, I've met people, they're jealous that some people have so much wealth, right? They're like, man, like, why does this person need that much wealth? Like, they're so affluent, like they don't need that much money and things like that. But it's like, well, they didn't take it from anyone else. And I'm not gonna say not every single wealthy person did that, but a lot of
ethical,
the
ethical,
yeah,
ethical.
ethical wealthy people, they're not taking
Yeah.
from someone else. What they did is they just created something. They created
Mm.
and they were able to
Yeah.
create something out of again that thought something that created their wealth. And he actually, I think he had said it in the book, but like there's like still so much gold that hasn't been mined out there, like within the earth. And if
Yep.
we think about that, we're like, all right, there's still so much wealth still stored, like even just hard physical wealth, like gold stored in the world, like that. There's still so much, abundance, money, and wealth out there that can still be
Yeah.
utilized, and we won't utilize it for, I mean, I don't think, ever. So having that state of competition, it really just limits you and always puts you in a place where you always feel like you're falling, behind. But I
Yeah.
truly like when I embrace the mindset of like, I'm not competing, I'm really just, out there to create and collaborate. And
Yep.
I'm out there to, be my best self every single day. You really operate from this, much better place. There's another book that I was reading, The Gap in the Game by Dan Sullivan, and he talks about like when
Mm.
you focus on like the gap, you're just focusing on like where you're falling short. You're like comparing yourself to like, maybe the ideal you see someone else in. And it really like, I'm sure a lot of us have been in this space before, but it's really like a negative feeling when you're just focusing on, what you're lacking or comparing yourself to, some.
Wow.
But when you're focusing on
Yep.
the gain, when you're focusing on like, okay, like I've achieved this and there's still so much more I can achieve. And I'm not limited by again, anyone out there that's doing the same thing. I just can be my best self. You really like you just get up with a different feeling. Like it's hard for me to describe or put
Yeah.
words to it, but like when you come out into the world with that sense of, creation and collaboration, like it's just there's so much more vitality in
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What it is gratitude. Like if
Yeah.
I could just put everything that you're saying in one word, it's gratitude. And that's something that he talks about in the book. He's
Mm-hmm.
like, hey, listen, you're going to have to cultivate a sense of gratitude because gratitude begets an opportunity for more good things to flow to you. So give thanks when somebody enters the market. Give thanks when a quote unquote competitor is doing well. It just means that there is a validation for your idea that you want to package
Yeah,
as value out in the market, and that begets more goodwill. And I'm not looking to
absolutely.
sound fluffy here, but that literally is what you're describing when you talk about this, creator slash collaborative economy that we find ourselves in.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So,
Yeah.
so real stuff there, man. I'm looking at some
Yeah.
other notes here. I read
Mm-hmm.
this when I was in Prague. So I'm looking at some other things that I want to talk about here. And something that's interesting that he brings up
Yeah. Another
is this idea. Go ahead.
Oh
Go ahead.
yeah, so another point that I think was really cool, because I heard again like another metaphor about this, but he says very early on, he says the object of all life development and anything that lives has an unalienable right to develop to its full potential, right? We
Yeah.
have this like right that cannot be taken away from us to all develop to our full potential. And I think that's such an amazing like idea,
Yeah.
for us to all like strive for our true best out there. Like, I heard this like put one way, and it was like if a tree had the consciousness of a man, it would only grow to 2 feet. But
Wow.
trees, you see they grow to their fullest potential. They don't limit themselves. They're out in the environment. They're like, I'm a tree, right? If I'm growing, they're gonna grow to whatever soil, whatever environment they're in. They're truly just gonna grow to their fullest potential. They're not sitting there thinking like, man, well, if I grow a little bit higher, I'm gonna affect this other tree out there. And maybe, if I spread my leaves
Wow.
wide, then I'm going to, impact this, frog. It's just focusing on being its best, fullest tree.
Yes. Oh my God. That brings up something that I practice in hot yoga 3 times a week. We have this pose in hot yoga. It's called tree pose.
Hmm.
And you basically are standing, you're rooted on one foot, and then you've got your other foot kind of tucked in right at where like your knee connects, to the bottom of your leg. And then you're supposed to like extend your branches
Yeah.
to like your fullest expression, whatever that is for you in that moment, and you hold it
Mhm.
for about 60 seconds. And that's where I always go in my mind is, I usually have an intention for those practices, but whenever I'm doing that specific pose, I always take myself to a place of removing any false barrier that I put on myself or that the world has put on me, anything that's external to me that's limiting me. And I'm like, here I am, world, in my fullest expression. Take me. And I want to reach for as much as I can grab. And that's what this book is trying to help us understand is like, there is no limit to what we can ultimately attain, so long as we don't place any limits or barriers on our creative flow, on
Mm-hmm.
our creative energy, which is where things form, which is where value can be created, which is where, that value ideally can be, you know, it can exceed the cash value that somebody's got in their pocket to where they're like, I want that thing, and boom, here's this cash. So we're not typically taught that. And this is why I love this book because it's a quick read. I mean, you could knock this out on a 60-minute flight if you're really ambitious, just to
Yeah,
kind of get like, the main points. It's about taking effective action on your creative ability
absolutely, absolutely.
in
And
its fullest expression.
yeah, and he says it in such a great way too. Like another thing, I think it's so important that, we mention this because a lot of people may read this or look at the cover, right? Like, judge it by its cover and be like, man, like this guy just
Yeah.
talking about, money and wealth and, there's so many other aspects in life. But like he very clearly says that like, no man can be fully satisfied unless his body is living in every function. And he says that we should all have, intellectual recreations, utilizing and reading books. We should be, fulfilling ourselves physically, going out there exercising and, pursuing, our greatest calling, physically. We should, be, elevating ourselves spiritually, emotionally within our relationships. Like he's really talking really about just being this, holistic, person, and really again reaching in many different ways. And he, encourages us to not just, do things that may satisfy the mind, not just do things that may satisfy the body, not just do things that may satisfy the spirit, but like make sure that you're looking at all those areas and, fully nurturing each of those elements of our, human selves, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
think that's so important to, grasp that like, because there are a lot of people that, maybe like, okay, I just need to chase the finances. But no, like, you need to, nurture your mind, become cultured. It's, and we've probably met people that, again, go down one track and they're not, they may be rich in the sense of finances, but they're not rich in the sense of life, which he's really
Right.
talking about this aspect of being rich in life, which requires you to nurture yourself in many different capacities, which I think is
Mhm.
so like, again, I just love that idea that he puts out there about that.
Absolutely, brother. So well said. So the next piece of the book really starts to speak to efficient action. And I know that we're coming up on time. So maybe we'll take that on next week's episode. So please tune in to how you can now begin to align yourself with being a person that's, taking action on the creative substances that are flowing for you. Super exciting, super practical. And, I don't want to give too much away right now, but the action piece for me is what has always created this almost obsessive like momentum. It's like you start
Mm,
taking this action on this idea, you're seeing it come to life, you're having conversations, and it is advancing you towards the ultimate expression of what was once just a thought or an idea. So I'm really excited, Kofi, for us to break that down for our listeners next week. I think that's to what you were saying several minutes ago, where there can be an amazing sense of gratitude from which people are beginning their days from when you start taking that action and you start to see how it compounds into momentum. So with that, I
mm,
think this is probably a
mhm.
good place for us to pause. We've
Yeah,
seeded,
yeah.
we've seeded, we've seeded some of the fundamental components around the science of getting rich. Let's let those kind of take root and ground. We've kind of watered them as well too, and we'll start to see how these ideas continue to express at a higher form in the next week's episode.
Yes, I love it. And last thing I'll leave the audience with is one thing that I definitely want guys to take away from this episode is, challenge some in those limiting beliefs that you may have. If I think it's so important, one quote I've heard is, we oftentimes will what is this? Let me think of it. Um, we will challenge all the thoughts we have except the ones that we believe to be true.
Mm.
Right? Our deepest biases, those are the ones that we oftentimes don't challenge. And, as you're, taking your time to yourself, as you're separating some space in your day to think, challenge your thoughts, especially ones you believe to be very true, that whether or not you feel in the moment they could be holding you back, but challenge all your thoughts to see which ones possibly could be limiting your ability to truly experience, more abundance in your life. So, man, I'm energized, brother. I'm energized.
Likewise.
Ah,
Likewise. We hope y'all are energized as well too. And with that, be well until we catch you on the next one.
see you
Peace.
guys soon. Peace.